plants first. And we realized we were not keeping up. And so this past year, we enacted a new technique, which I'll explain on the next slide with a few photos. But essentially, you do some cutting and painting as well near the water, like I explained. But then you can clear cut the area and allow it to reseed, and then hit the sprouts with something called Garlon in the fall. And then really, once you have an infestation to a certain point, you just have to keep monitoring it and keeping up with it. So here is what the buckthorn leaves look like. And here are the leaves with some seeds. And then this time of the year, they look more like this. Some of them, get up to north of Wausau, and they're probably looking like this. South of Wausau, they still have some green droopy leaves on them. But you can see kind of these angular stems with some thorns, although this one appears a little more thorny than a lot of them I've seen. So basically, the next few pictures are going to be some initial results. So we cut in midsummer, and you can just take a brush cutter with a metal blade on it rather than a weed whip. Weed whip won't take care of it at all, but we use a brush cutter, and we just basically mowed it. And then it resprouts in the late summer, and then you can hit it with a foliar herbicide in late October. I recommend spraying earlier in the fall when the weather is not as much of an issue. This year we got into the difficulty of we cut it, and then we didn't get any decent days. It was either raining or we just couldn't get it together. So we're going to try treating it in the spring. But you can see here what buckthorn does. In the back here is, let's see, I'm not pointing on the right screen here, but you can see this kind of wall of buckthorn. That was like this up front. Here's the pile of brush we cut. And this is what was the following year. So this is in the middle of the summer 2020. And it's done pretty well. There's still some buckthorn in there that resprouted, but that's easy to hit now. This is an adjacent area that we didn't treat because it's near the water. And so we wanted to use it as a control. So we mowed it and it regrew. So you can see the difference between here and the ground over here. And this is the area we treated this year, which is really probably the first area at the school forest that had an infestation. And you can just see literally a wall of buckthorn. So we've cleared everything out in front of it. And so in the spring, we'll hit it with this foliar herbicide. And one of the wonderful things about school forests is they're great opportunities to do science, and invasive species control provides tons of opportunities for student engagement in natural resources management and science. You could test out different treatments and document that with students and have, especially in high school. Yeah, obviously you don't want to have students treating with Roundup or anything like that. Really, once the trees get to be a certain size, there's really not another way to get rid of them. Even fire doesn't get rid of it. So you do have to use treatment unfortunately, with herbicides. A few other invasives that I've had experience with are barberry and garlic mustard on a personal property, and then honeysuckle, which is kind of like buckthorn, but it's not nearly as invasive. It takes a lot longer and it's easier to control. And then a new threat is porcelain berry. This was just announced. Well, it's been in Madison for a little while, but they found some in Sturgeon Bay. It's was found in a residential area in town in Sturgeon Bay, and they're really worried that it'll get out into the outlying areas. So I'll just show you a little bit. So here's barberry, and you can see it's just taken over. The bad thing about barberry is once it does sprout, it grows relatively fast, and it harbors all kinds of mice, which like to harbor the limes tick, and so they've shown in some areas where barberry gets this bad that it actually can increase rates of Lyme transmission. So barberry is an important one to control. And this is garlic mustard, again, on a property that I help to manage. And this is what garlic mustard looks like up close. and it literally can take over an area as well. And I've heard that it can actually start hampering the production of new forests. So it can actually inhibit woody tree growth, even though it's just an herbaceous plant. I don't have a picture of honeysuckle, but it's just about everywhere. I mean, there's native honeysuckle as well. This is the porcelain berry picture that the DNR put out. And if you look at the berries on a better picture than this, it actually looks like kind of like porcelain. And this is a vine plant that can literally grow so thick over trees that it'll kill the tree. So we want to keep an eye on that. So I just want to share quickly also that the WCEE, which I work for LEAF, which is the forestry education program. Sorry, we had that kind of informal beginning to this, but LEAF is part of the Wisconsin Center for Environmental Education. And we have a trunks and kits program. The Forest Health Kit has invasive species, although it doesn't have really much for plant invasives, but we're planning to update that kit. And also the forestry education kit. This is the list of the kits that are available during COVID. We have many more kits than this, but because of difficulty, I guess, sanitizing those kits, that we chose just these here. And with that, here's just a few acknowledgements, and we're going to launch a poll for everybody. We're just curious if LEAF decided to hold an invasive species workshop at a school forest potentially in conjunction with the DNR, would you be interested in doing that? Now, it would probably be, we didn't put this on the poll, but it would have to be during the growing season, so things would be easy to identify. So probably late summer, early fall would be the time we would run such a workshop. And we've had good results. I've never run one of these, but I've heard a few years ago they ran one with the DNR and some other invasive species experts, and it was a really big success. Not to bias the polling.
As we're waiting for the poll to come in, Steve, Ruth Ann says, goats eat buckthorn. Would you ever think about putting goats on your school forest?
That's an interesting thought. I know, now who's the professor in forestry? I'm embarrassed, but I can't remember her name, but she does that, I think, the UWSP professor, Holly. Is Holly the right name? Kate, help me out here.
I don't know either, but
yeah, anyway, I have a friend between Wausau and Merrill who has had one of the UWSP professors who raises goats, had some goats on his land. It depends on the level of infestation, really, I think. And I'm not so sure at Newman School Forest, the Rudolph Environmental Center, you saw how thick it was. Goats would work in some areas, but I've not really read much about them other than I'm sure they can help control some smaller buckthorn.
well, and
there we go.
It is Holly. We were right on that. Sam
Thank you, Sam.
is coming in and saying yes. But in terms of the poll, yes, definitely. There's a few people, and maybe is 60%. So we'll have to think about that one.
All right. Thanks, Kate and everyone. Stop sharing here.